Mistakes, life's building blocks. Have you ever made a mistake? Now just be honest about it. Have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever blown it? Have you ever made a bad decision? Fact is, we all have. The fact is, we make more misjudgments than proper judgments. Because man who's born of woman is a few days and full of troubles, Job said. My text is Psalm 37. Psalm 37, verses 23 through 28. The steps of a good man, a good woman, a saved person are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, though he make some terrible mistakes, she shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. I have been young, David says, and now I am old. Yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. He is ever merciful to those who make mistakes, and lendeth, keeps on giving. And his seed is blessed. Depart from evil, and do good, and dwell forevermore. For the Lord loveth judgment, and forsaketh not his saints. They are preserved forever, but the seed of the wicked shall be cut off. One of the toughest questions for human beings is, where is God when everything goes wrong in my life? When the bottom falls out, when your world collapses around you, when there's no human explanation for what's going on, when God is silent, then what? What happens when we cannot hear God speaking? When everything seems silent? Every one of us has had an experience, or many of them, where we felt totally alone. And during that time, be honest, we're asking, where is God when I need him so badly? I'm talking about those times when you've done all you know to do, you're trying to walk in the Lord's will as best you can, but there is no answer from God. Those dark times. Such times of spiritual loneliness come to all of us. Not only when we have failed God, but when we're sometimes walking in the light, fellowshipping with him and doing all that we know to please him. We've all felt that way at times in our lives, and I know that during those times, with Christ living within us and peace with God, we wonder, what is God up to? We seem to be wrestling with the whole issue of God's power in our lives at times. We're busy serving God. And yet God seems to be silent in the midst of all of our busyness and all of our activity. It is in such times that we need to be reminded that God is still at work in our lives. When we cannot feel him, he is there. When we cannot see or hear him, he is always there. He said, I will never, never leave thee nor forsake thee. He is conforming us to the image of his dear Son. Let me give you some reasons for God's silence. Some reasons for God's silence, and there are times when God is silent. Number one, sometimes we are just too busy to listen. There are times when God is silent because we're not listening to what he has to say. He sees all the hustle and the bustle in our lives, in our daily routine, and he realizes we would not hear him even if he shouted at us. Our lives are so filled with rushing here and rushing there and meeting schedules and meeting obligations that we're not taking the time, uninterrupted, isolated before him, to be quiet and to seek his face. And I would remind you that busyness, B-U-S-Y, busyness, is not necessarily godliness. It may be a necessity to be busy, but it is an activity that can control you. You can get addicted to busyness. You can get addicted to endless, unstoppable schedules. And often we get too busy to pray, to read the scriptures, to meet with God, or even to spend time with our own families. We get caught up in the urgent to the great expense of the important, and the urgent is often unimportant. We've got to know the difference. Quiet contemplation is not a virtue of modern society today. We tend to do more because we have more. We have cell phones, we have computers, We have automobiles. There are airplanes available to us. We can go great distances quickly, and we're going more but enjoying it less. I don't mean to imply that activity is always wrong. On the contrary, we have a God-given mandate to work. Industriousness is a virtue which God blesses. But when activity becomes an end in itself and obsesses us, and we're so busy in the work of the Lord that God is not working His work in us, then we are robbed of personal and spiritual vitality. Recently, I was talking to a man of some renown. You'd know his name if I called it. I was expressing a burden that was heavy upon my heart to him. We were standing in a room where a lot of people were, and we were up close together. And I noticed he kept glancing around the room as though he were looking for somebody else. And I finally realized he wasn't listening, wasn't interested. So I gave up and quietly slipped away because he wasn't listening. And unfortunately, that is the way we often treat God. He's up close trying to tell us something, but we're looking around the room. We're looking down the day. We're looking at our schedule. We're thinking of what's ahead, what's important to us. The Bible reminds us, this is one of my favorite verses, Jeremiah 29:13, and ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all of your heart, with your entire focus, with your spiritual mind and heart zeroed in on my presence. Finding God's answers to life's toughest questions is a matter of the heart, a matter of the heart. Sometimes he is silent. Sometimes God stops talking to us because we are so busy He can't get through it to us. A verse that ought to be written upon your heart daily. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Oswald Chambers, in My Utmost for His Highest, said it this way: watch where God puts you in darkness, and when you're there, keep your mouth shut. Darkness is the time to listen and heed. If you talk to other people, you cannot hear what God is saying. When you're in the dark, listen, and God will give you a very precious message for someone else when you get back into the light. Another reason for God's silence sometimes is we have already said no to Him. We have already said no to Him. There are times when God is silent because He's spoken to us before, given us clear instructions, and we've been disobedient. Therefore, He withdraws new direction and new light until we go back to the crossroads and there obey the light and the directions which He's already given. It's only when we act upon the truth that we already know that God gives new truth. I'm often intrigued by the story of Jonah. Most of us know the story of his famous 3-day, 3-night ride in the belly of the great fish. We often say whale. The Bible doesn't say that. It says God prepared a great fish, and that's all it tells us. But few people remember the real point of the story. God had told Jonah to go to Nineveh. Nineveh was the capital of Israel's enemy, Assyria. He further instructed him to preach God's message of judgment and to call the Ninevites to repentance. He didn't want to do that. Instead, he went in the opposite direction. He sailed westward out to sea, and thus the 3-day, 3-night ride in the belly of the great fish. Then he repented, and he went and preached, and God gave great revival. If God has spoken to you about a specific matter in your life, a specific job He wants you to do, don't rationalize it. Don't try to explain it away. Just say to God, yes. The Christian life is saying every morning an eternal yes to whatever He is saying. An eternal yes.